Welcome to the Soul Mirror. I'm your host, Shreya. Today we have a fascinating mind joining us, JD Pincus, a distinguished expert in motivation and emotion with a doctorate in social psychology. His work digs deep into what truly moves human beings from inside out. And today, he brings us a powerful, resonant claim that the spiritual path is not just meaningful, it's the only path that genuinely works. This conversation promises clarity, challenge, and a fresh lens on what drives real human being. Let's step dive into the inner world behind the outer life and explore what makes the spiritual journey indispensable. Welcome, JD. I'm honored to have you on my show.
Thanks very much, Shreya. It's great to be here.
And you say the spiritual path is the only one that truly works. What brought you to this conviction at a personal level?
Yeah. So this I kind of came to over many years, where I kind of began this work thinking about much more mundane things, frankly, thinking about how, to get motivate, consumers, for instance, to be interested in different products and brands and that sort of thing. And of course, there's a whole range of reasons, emotional reasons why someone would want to buy some certain things. If you are looking to get life insurance or buying batteries for a smoke detector or a flashlight, you're really motivated by the need for safety, the need for security, right? If you are, selling I don't know, language services, let's say, learn a new language, so you can go abroad and connect with people, or you're looking to, master calculus, so that you can be the best engineer that you can be. The motivation there is really about self-actualization, sort of becoming your best self. If you want to connect with people and feel more included, there's a whole range of products and services that are, designed for people like that. From, Coca-Cola markets itself as being something that's all about, buy the world a Coke, give this Coke to your friend. Salty snacks are also very focused on sort of sharing in the moment. It's sort of all about belonging and inclusion. And on and on. So you can think of motivations, sort of emotional needs that are fulfilled. Those are a staple of Madison Avenue advertising. They've mastered the connection of emotional needs to products and services. And I lived in that world for a good, 18 years or so. I was a consultant to lots of different brands. I, traveled the world. I did a lot of that kind of work, segmentation, positioning, brand equity, on tons of top brands. When I kind of stepped back from it all, I realized that there was something that was missing. And that was, a sort of purpose, right? Things you wouldn't see, needs that definitely existed, but were not things that were obvious. So I came up with this model. Basically, I took what was really not my idea, but it was in every major world religion, all five major world religions. It was in world systems of philosophy and psychology, even in history, that basically posited that there are four life domains. So the first of these domains is the domain of the self. And we talked a little bit about that, right? Needs for safety, authenticity, self-actualization. That's all about me, right? Me growing, me kind of becoming myself. There's also needs that have to do with other people, right? The sort of social needs. I talked about that a little bit, right? The need for inclusion or belonging, the need for caring, the need for recognition or esteem, right? That's all about sort of social concerns. There's also a big focus, particularly in the consumerist, sort of commercial world, on material needs, right? The need for autonomy, to take action, to become stronger, to become more skilled. Immersion, the idea of kind of losing yourself in the moment of kind of pleasure or indulgence. And finally, the need for success, material success, to sort of experience it, to show it, to broadcast it to others. You see this with, fancy cars, fancy hotels, things like that, right? Clothing. Um, but what's missing then is we have the self and the social as opposites, the material and what? The spiritual. The spiritual is the one that was missing. It's the thing that isn't material. It's immaterial by definition. And this was really the core of my work to sort of articulate what were the three levels of needs in the spiritual domain. And doing a lot of research and a lot of reading, I discovered that pretty much every theologian ever, anybody who seriously thought and wrote about the spiritual domain, argued that it all begins with justice. It begins with the need for fairness, equality, not favoring the rich over the poor, for instance, not favoring your group over another group, but basically really ensuring that there's justice for all. Once we have justice in place, there's a need for ethics, which is really about taking the principles of justice and somewhat of caring and applying them to situations where you might have an opportunity to favor your own self-interest over someone else's. So you see this a lot in business ethics. Are you being totally honest about the promises that you're making about your product or service? Are you being transparent about, decision-making processes and the like? That's where ethics lives. So if we have justice in place, good is rewarded, bad is punished. We have ethics in place. We're able to reasonably restrain our self-interest as appropriate and in accordance with morality. Then that's our first opportunity to get to the last level of that, which I call transcendence. And this is, I use the example of nirvana. I basically talk about the fact that it's defined as you've achieved a kind of a higher purpose that transcends all individual and group needs, that now is at the peak of the spiritual domain, where you essentially are blowing yourself out like a candle, which is what nirvana is, right? And it's sort of opening yourself up to sort of cosmic will and doing the things that you think are aligned with the highest purpose, right? So that's essentially my model. It's sort of a model of 4 domains, 3 levels, and my basic contention is that we start as people at the lowest level of the self-domain. There's a need for safety, and we over time move upward toward self-actualization, and we move to the right through sort of becoming aware of that there's a world that's not just us. It's not just an extension of our own needs. This is our material world. There's a social need of other people, social realm. And then eventually the spiritual, which is the immaterial, which is taking all the principles that came before it and applying it to people we don't know and situations we don't know and species that aren't ours and, universal principles, if you will. And I think that really defines human development. That is the course of human development. It's very easy to get stuck along the way, and we've seen many, many famous people who become stuck, at the level of safety. It's like I'm going to do whatever it takes to feel safe, even if it's completely unethical. I'm going to do whatever I want in terms of expressing my authenticity and who I am, even if it's at somebody else's expense. I'm going to flaunt my wealth and get stuck on success. I'm going to, because I value inclusion, I'm going to exclude other people, that sort of thing. We see this kind of thing all the time. But the general principle here is you're going from bottom left and safety up to that transcendent higher purpose. And the goal is to not get stuck along the way.
Yes. I imagine your realization then come instantly, but through emotional contrasts. And also, as a social psychologist, how do you reconcile scientific frameworks of motivation with spiritual explanations of human behavior?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that was a problem I ran into. Frankly, it was very hard for me to get this initial paper published because people would want to, reviewers were uncomfortable with this concept that there was a spiritual domain that actually mattered in psychology, which I found very odd considering it had been there since the very beginning. William James, for instance, talked at length about the need for a transcendent higher purpose. He wrote books about the varieties of religious experience and spiritual experience. And to him, it was extremely important and a neglected part in psychology to acknowledge that that was something that was extremely motivating. And you see it in the world today. Some of the most extreme behaviors, good and bad, are driven by religion, spirituality, and things you can't see, sort of immaterial higher principles, for good or bad. Uh, and the idea that somehow that was not relevant to psychology was, I think, just patently absurd. But I had to make the argument, I had to kind of lay it all out and say, in fact, in social psychology, there are established theories about a need for justice and a need for doing what's right. And Paul Bloom's work came out where he basically showed that infants, 6 months old, would preferentially look at, moral characters, characters who do good, and look away from characters who do bad in these little puppet shows that they would display for them. And there's no way to explain that other than to know that there is an innate desire for morality and justice that isn't taught. It's something that you're just born with. And I think that's a really profound insight. But I had to kind of review that literature and show that there was also a need for morality, a need for doing what's right instead of wrongdoing. The work of Daniel Batson on helping behavior and altruism really comes into play there a lot. And then the need for that higher purpose. Some pretty significant players have spoken about that, including Maslow. It's sad that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when you learn about it in an introductory psychology class, they seem to cap it at self-actualization. The end of his life, he spoke almost entirely, exclusively about what comes after self-actualization, and that was spiritual transcendence. Lawrence Kohlberg, the guy who gave us the stages of cognitive and moral development, moral reasoning, his highest level was also transcendence, and yet that often doesn't get taught in textbooks. So it's very well documented. It has a very strong history, but exactly as you said, typical mainstream psychology still hasn't really, taken off the blinders and let this insight in.
Yes. I think it's really intriguing because many listeners rely on science for validation, yet often sense something beyond it. And I think your perspective could bridge that gap in a compelling way. And why do you believe emotional well-being is more sustainable when rooted in spirituality rather than strategy, discipline, or rational mindset training?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a great question. I think there's a misconception that's sort of been we've been in the grip of for a long time, that what you're thinking about right now is what matters. That somehow that's what's real. And you see that in sort of sayings like, perception is reality, and cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance. If I simply change what the contents are of my consciousness right now, that is going to somehow affect me emotionally and basically fix my problems. The problem with that is that all the neuroscience and common sense, frankly, and lots of experimental work, behavioral economics, it's all shown that emotion is primary. Our emotional needs are what drive us. And you see it in the most basic functions, in homeostasis. When we're thirsty, all we can think about is getting a drink. When we're hungry, all we can think about is getting food. When we're tired, all we can think about is sleep. And the idea that you could somehow override these things, sort of consciously and say, oh, that really doesn't matter to me right now, is just fantasy. By the same token, our emotions are designed to let us know how our body is doing, right? If I'm feeling excluded, I'm not feeling included by a group that I care about, that hurts. That's extremely painful. That actually can cause brain damage over the long term. It can shorten your life, for instance. And that is a need that we feel and motivates our behavior to try to correct that imbalance. So that's a thing that we have to kind of get away from this myth that what we're thinking about right now is all that matters, and understand that these are the needs underneath all of that that are actually driving everything we want, everything we try to propel ourselves toward, the goals that we set for ourselves, and ultimately they shape what we're thinking about. I think it's important to kind of understand our rational faculties are really there to make justifications for our behavior, right? We do things and then we use our rational minds to basically explain to ourselves and others why we did it, or why it was the right thing to do. It's not actually running the show. What's running the show are these emotions. And these emotions are deeply connected to spirituality. They're not rational, but they are tilted toward the good, right? They are tilted toward wanting to achieve wellness and perfection, justice, ethics, to kind of promote the concept of divinity. I think that that's really what they're there to do. And there's a lot of things in our society that kind of get in the way of that. But I think that's what we're sort of designed to do. We're kind of spiritual beings that are often led astray. But that's the sort of basic template, I think.
Yes. I think many people struggle to distinguish between genuine spiritual grounding and spiritual bypassing. So your clarity here could offer real guidance. And also, in your experience helping individuals grow, what is the most common emotional pattern that reveals someone is disconnected from their spiritual core?
Yeah, I think the difference really comes out in the difference between asking someone what they want. If you just ask people, make a list of all your goals, make a list of what it is that you really want right now, um, and other approaches for getting at that. Uh, there's a reason why the sort of Freudian psychoanalysts would have people lie down on a couch and close their eyes and talk about their dreams, for instance, and talk about metaphor and use images and that sort of thing, ink blots, and try to interpret them, try to get at these things indirectly. Because when people are just in a rational space, they will list all of these things that, again, they make sense, right? They make sense to a listener. I want to clean out my garage. I want to pay off my mortgage. I want to, they're all very rational, physical, material things for the most part. Um, what they aren't able to tell you is what's really motivating that, because we don't have conscious access to that. We there are ways to get at it, but they're not simple or easy. I've come up with an app that basically is designed to do that. That shows people images one every second, and that you basically just select the ones that match a prompt sentence. Like, when I think about the direction of my life, I wish I could feel a bit more, and then an image will pop up every second, and then you either select it or don't. But the beauty of that method is that those concepts in those images are tied to my 12 cells. And I've been tested and validated to mean those things only. But I give people no time to think, right? You have no time to think at all. So you go through and you click some images, you don't click some others. You end up with a profile of what it is that the person, what's really driving them. And what's great about it is that they don't take any ownership of it. Like, I don't know why I picked what I picked. It was too fast. I wish I had more time to think about it. Da, da, da. But we find that that's incredibly predictive of their actual emotional well-being. And we find that it's incredibly predictive of their behavior. Like, it can explain like 70 or 80% of certain behaviors. Just this quick 3-minute image exercise. And again, people are uncomfortable with this notion that there's something that powerful lurking below the surface that a little 3-minute image exercise could reveal, but they have no conscious awareness of it. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, definitely. It is really beautiful the way you say it. And I think it seems those subtle emotional cues are often overlooked, yet they might be the clearest markers of misalignment. And this is a wonderful conversation with you. So, if after this my listeners want to connect with you, then what's the best way?
So they can connect with me on LinkedIn, it's J. David Pincus, or they can go to our site, which is agilebrain.com. And you can take that assessment that I talked about, that quick 3-minute image assessment, take that for free. You can choose the area of your life you want to point it at, whether it's, sort of the direction your life is going, your most important relationships, how you feel about your work, etc. And it'll give you an instant report. There's that. And you can contact me through the site. All of my papers, or most of my papers, are listed there, so you can connect to them and link to them, and get into all the other areas that I've basically taken this theory and applied it to, like things like leadership and culture, values, goals, engagement. So there's a ton of material out there, and of course we have the book as well. If people are interested in kind of really taking a deep dive into this theory and into the evidence that supports it, you can go to Amazon. It's called The Emotionally Agile Brain. Mastering the 12 emotional needs that drive us, and that is available too.
Yes, and I will make sure to attach all these details and links below so that the listeners can find them easily and get in touch with you. And thank you, JD, for opening a window into the deeper architecture of human motivation and reminding us that the inner growth is not just a practice, it's a path toward wholeness. And to all my listeners, let this be a nudge to explore your own inner landscape with sincerity and courage. Your life expands when your inner world aligns. If today's conversation starts something in you, follow that spark. The journey begins where you choose to look with it. And don't forget to hit the follow button, subscribe, and also feel free to share your thoughts because your ears deserve premium content. Thank you.